Most bankers aren't ready to help you until after their third cup of coffee. But with Central National Bank's after-hours service, you don't have to wait for the bank lobby to open to get help. You can contact us from 6 to 8:30 in the morning or from 5 to 10 in the evening, and we'll connect you to a real, live, local person who can answer questions and fix problems 7 days a week. Bank different. Bank Central. Central National Bank. Member FDIC.
It's done.
Connor McDavid! It's not real!
The goal of the year,
Panarin!
part of the past. The celebrations, forgotten. The history,
Vegas Golden Knights!
history. We're back to a blank slate. Clean ice. All that matters now is what happens next. The Stanley Cup playoffs.
Eastern Conference Final begins Wednesday.
Welcome to Women's Hoops and Talks, the What podcast, where we are elevating the voice of women in basketball. I'm Tara.
And I'm Cassidy. Thank you so much for listening today. We've got a great show coming up. We're going to check in around the league after this most recent trade deadline.
And before we get started with that, let me just remind everyone that they can follow the Hoops and Talks podcast on Twitter at Hoops and Talks. And you can subscribe to the show in the Blazers Edge podcast feed on whatever platform you use to get your podcast. And thanks for joining us today.
So let's talk about the most recent news. It may not have been before the trade deadline, but Portland just signed Enes Kanter. How you feeling about it, Tara?
So I am super shocked that it happened, and I'm also just almost as shocked at how excited I am about it. I never thought I'd be like, yay, we're getting Enes Kanter, but it just seems like kind of just a no-lose type proposition.
Yeah.
What do you think?
I think it is definitely a no-lose proposition, and then it's possibly a very much a gain. I think I could see him even working well with Nurkic if we needed a game where we needed two real bigs on the floor at the same time. I know Kanter's best friend and manager is actually from Bosnia originally.
Oh,
so maybe,
I did not know that.
maybe there'll be a little connection there. But I'm excited to see what happens. I know that it can mean less minutes for some people possibly, but headed into the playoff season, I think it is an amazing pickup.
Yeah, so we're recording this right before the Golden State game, and the Blazers have had a pretty tough slate of games the last couple of weeks coming out of that weird long break. It's just been hard to get them into a groove. And one of the things that's been most concerning to me is the play of Zach Collins has not been what it was earlier on in the season. And, it's not like a knock on him. I don't think he's like bad or anything, but I just think that he needs more time. And I think he's going to develop into a perfectly fine player. But looking at how it's been lately, I just don't feel like he's quite ready. And I think that what I was hoping that the Blazers would do would be to go in and get like a plug and play big that can just go in, give you some minutes. He doesn't have to give you a ton of minutes, but when he goes in, he's just going to do the basics of what needs to get done. I don't want Zach Collins to lose a lot of minutes over this. I just feel like he's a little outmatched by some of the big bodies that he goes up against every night.
Yeah.
I don't know. Who do you think that Collins or Leonard or where do you think the minutes are going to come from?
I think the minutes are I want to say that they're going to come from Leonard. At this point, I think that this team has invested a lot in Zach's development, and we've gotten to see him develop a whole lot in a short period of time. And I think they're gonna keep working on that development. And I see that probably Myers is going to be losing some minutes, I would think.
Well, and so also, that reminds me, maybe if Zach continues to play power forward alongside Enes as a center. Because lately these last few games, they've been trying Zach out at center. And I think that's where I'm looking at him going, maybe not yet. But if he could reprise kind of his power forward role, I don't think Enes Kanter brings, the same thing that Ed Davis did at all. I think they're very different. And, but I do think that maybe playing alongside him could continue his development, and not, so rather than losing time altogether because he can't effectively yet do what we need at center, maybe he'll continue to develop in that power forward slot. So yeah, it's going to be interesting to see what happens.
Yeah, I am super excited, and I'm also excited because I feel like a lot of the more challenging matchups for us have been matchups where the team is bigger than us, and I think this can help us in those situations especially.
Yeah, and Cantor's been around a long time. He's in his 8th season, but he's only 26.
Yeah.
So he's in his prime, I guess, is what they say. I was thinking that he was older than that, but when I was checking into his stats, he is 26. Right now with the Knicks, he's averaging 14 points and 10.5 rebounds, and rebounds is something that I'm really happy to see.
Yeah.
I mean, the Blazers are number 3 in rebounding, so it's not like they're bad rebounders. But one of the things that I feel like they lost with Ed Davis was the offensive rebounds.
Yes.
I see a lot of nights where they're in there almost getting offensive rebounds.
So many tips. so many
almost
hand on the ball.
Yeah. So, maybe he can bolster them in that way too.
That would be nice to see. And also off the court, he's just an interesting person.
Yes.
Like, he is a star on Twitter, I would say. I think a lot of people find him quite entertaining, and he's just fascinating. I think he has an intense drive, and I think that I was reading a lot about him, and I think that he finds communities, and he kind of really adopts that community as his own and kind of creates families where he goes. And I think Portland is a really good town for someone who does that.
Yeah, that's an interesting way to put it, because everywhere that he seemed like he was, all in every place. Even the Knicks, even though like towards the end of his tenure there, he wasn't getting the time that he wanted and stuff. But he seemed like he was all in on New York while he was there. I mean, you're right. He's a fascinating person. His whole background about being Turkish, and this will give us more of a chance to brush up some more on more international relation type information. But yeah, I mean, the Blazers are really strong in the social media game right now. I mean, they have some of the best players who aren't best because they're just like petty, I mean, Joel Embiid is certainly entertaining and everybody loves him, but he's also like gets a lot of attention because he's just petty and he says petty things that are funny and entertaining. But
I highly enjoy, but
but like between Evan Turner and CJ and Damian and now Enes Kanter, I think they actually have some interesting content on top of just the regular joking around stuff.
Yeah, I think it's going to be fun overall.
I can't believe how excited I am about Enes Kanter.
I'm very excited.
I was just like, I found out at work. I had this really big presentation that I did at work, and I came back from it, and like my phone had all these messages on it, and I was like, "What's going on?" And they were just like, "Ennis," and I was like, "What are you talking about? What?"
I know. I was in cash and carry shopping for work, and my husband starts texting me, and he's like, "Blazers pick up Enes Kanter," and I was like, "What? What?
Like, what are you talking about?
What is going on?" And he's like, "You need to check Bleacher Report. I know you don't believe me." And I was like, "Okay, I'm going. I'm so delighted. I'm so happy."
One of the names that people have been throwing around to fill that final roster spot was Carmelo Anthony. And in my mind, this is a much better pickup than Carmelo Anthony would have been.
And I love that he picked us over the Lakers.
I hope that's true. I don't know if
I hope it's true, but
trying to like stick it to the Lakers like one more time. But
I'll take it if it is.
Yeah.
I'm still bitter from those playoff years. Oh yeah. Still can't stand Kobe, so
yeah. Well, so that is the exciting thing that is going on in Portland right now. And it has to do with is the buyout market. Obviously the trade deadline just passed. And so we've got go ahead and move into the next section of the podcast. The Blazers have also added, of course, Rodney Hood. And so we got a chance I talked to Diana Allen of SLC Dunks. She, writes for the blog for the Utah Jazz, which is where he started his career. Had a really fun and interesting conversation with her about him and his time there. She really, really liked him and thinks that we're going to be really happy with Rodney Hood. And how do you feel about how he's been fitting in so far?
I'm liking it. I like the fit. I think he's extremely motivated and wants to be here. And that's the kind of player I want to watch here. So
yeah, I'm
excited.
I feel the same way. I think he's, just fit right in and, so far, so good. So let's go ahead and listen to my talk with Diana Allen. Diana, thank you so much for joining us on Women's Hoops and Talks.
Thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Well, since you are a first-time guest on the show, could you start off by introducing yourself and telling us a little bit about how you came to cover the Utah Jazz?
Yeah. So, oh my goodness, I've been writing about the Jazz for about eight years now, maybe 10. It's been quite a while. I've been a Jazz fan since I was about 10 years old. And I remember coming home from a field trip. It was a night field trip for some reason. And my dad was watching a Jazz game, and it just looked interesting to me. And I said, Dad, what is this? And he told me it was the Jazz. And I asked how basketball worked, basically. And he said, you see that little guy right there? Meaning John Stockton. And I said, yes. And he said, watch him, and he'll throw the ball to that big guy, meaning Karl Malone. And he said, that is all you need to know about Jazz basketball. And so for years and years, that's all I needed to know about the Jazz. Then when I was married with young kids, I always continued to watch the Jazz, but even more so when Darren Williams and Carlos Boozer was on the team. And I just felt like, oh my goodness, I'm spending all this time watching the Jazz. I want to do more. And so at the time, the UtahJazz.com had fan bloggers. And so I applied to be one of their fan bloggers for their site. And as the homemaker viewpoint, I got it. And so I wrote for Jazz. It was called Jazz Bots. I wrote for them for a few years. And then SLC Dunk, which is part of SB Nation, asked me to write for them about 5 years ago. And I've been there ever since.
Wow, you might be one of the... Well, we had Ann Peterson who writes for the AP, and she's been doing it for like 20 years, but you're one of the longer tenured bloggers, at least SB Nation ones that we've met so far. That's really cool.
Yeah, it's been tons of fun. I love SLC Dunk. It's just such a unique voice for the Jazz and gives such good perspective. We have great writers over there. It's fun to be a part of them.
When you first started writing, what kinds of did you do, game recaps? Did you do, previews, or did you do something else entirely?
So when I first started writing, it was mainly game recaps. But then as social media started to pick up, it was fun to get to the personal side of the players. And so just picking stories about what they would show on Twitter and Instagram and bringing a personal voice into our the Jazz, and
a little more personality from the players themselves. Mm-hmm.
And I like to write with emotion. Most of our writers at SLC Dunk now are all about analytics and numbers, which is wonderful. Like that's where basketball is at. And I try to bring a more personal side, emotional side. I'm very emotional about the Jazz. So most of my posts are about that, how I feel during the game, or how I feel about certain players or movements or non-movements. And
I can totally relate. I just ate way too much pizza because the Blazers got just totally destroyed by OKC tonight, and I ate way too much pizza, so I can totally relate.
Yep, I have been there many times. Yes, that's me.
The Blazers just traded for Rodney Hood, who was with Cleveland, but previous to that, he had 3.5 years at Utah. So I wanted to reach out and find out what we could learn about Rodney Hood, what you remember about his time there.
All right. So we loved Rodney Hood. We thought that when Gordon Hayward left that he would be the star. But before that, when he was drafted, we were super excited. We thought we were getting the best player that we could for so far down in the draft. We were way excited. And I remember during his draft interview that he just broke down and he nearly started to cry. He was just so overwhelmed with emotion. And he talked about how he couldn't believe that someone from Meridian, Mississippi, the small town of Meridian, Mississippi, got that far to be able to be drafted into the NBA. And from that moment, I was like, oh my gosh, I love this guy because he really wants to be here. And it was just so touching. And Rodney, he's a good guy. He's a really good guy. You guys are really lucky to have him. I was sad when we traded him. I knew it had to happen to make way for Donovan Mitchell, but you guys are lucky. And I think his role with you will be more appropriate. He had some big games with us, which I think led the Dennis Lindsey and Quinn Snyder to believe that he could be the guy when Gordon Hayward left because he had game winners for us. He had this one game winner against Dallas that all Jazz fans remember, and he had this little shimmy afterwards, and oh my gosh, you just love him. And then when we played the Clippers in the playoffs a few years ago, he stepped up big when there was a game that Gordon Hayward was sick and only played a few minutes and left the game. And Rodney stepped up big and hit some big three-pointers to help us beat the Clippers. And so we thought that he could be the guy.
It sounds like that Donovan Mitchell maybe came on faster than people were expecting and had a bigger role faster than people thought that he would. And so he kind of replaced Rodney. Is that what happened?
Yeah. So the summer that Gordon left was an awful summer for Jazz fans. Personally, I was glad. I was never a fan of Gordon Hayward.
Really? Why?
Oh my gosh. Ugh. Okay.
Did you think he was overrated or something?
He was so overrated. He was just so fake. Like everything was just manicured. Like he was just awful. Like he showed no emotion, and you could tell that it was just a job for him. That he didn't love the team. This is my perspective. Obviously, I don't know, but that he just was doing it for a job. There wasn't the love for the team and the teammates. I mean, if you go on YouTube and find a video called Where's Gordo? And it's him like during interactions. You know how players get up with each other and fight. And every single one, Gordon just backs off and slowly backs away. And is never standing up for his teammates. And that video is hilarious. I recommend it to anyone.
Oh, that's a good extra little tidbit.
Yeah. But yeah, I just never felt like he wanted to be there. And I felt like he was overrated. The system that Quinn built was for him. And that's how he got his stats. And we see that in Boston, right? I mean, yes, he had that injury and that was horrific. And I was sad and that he missed a year and it's taking him time to come back. But when the system's not built around him, he's a good role player. I don't think he can be the star of a team. And Utah was desperate for a star at that point because we didn't have anything. And so they built it in Gordon Hayward. But, oh my gosh, like he would be there for 2 quarters of a game. So his numbers would look nice, but he didn't really lead us anywhere. It took getting Joe Johnson and some other vets, Boris Diaw, to get us to the playoffs that final year before Gordon left. And yes, so that's my opinion on Gordon Hayward.
So after he left, then Rodney Hood seemed like he was ready to step into a bigger role.
Absolutely. And that's what the Jazz advertised the entire summer and talked about it like on local radio and on the blogs. And it was going to be Rodney Hood now. He was going to be our star. But then along came Donovan Mitchell, and he, oh my gosh, just a few months into his rookie year, just took over. And it was apparent that he was the player that we needed. And there was just no room for Rodney anymore.
Now, do you remember how Rodney and Gobert played together?
Yeah.
I mean, was Gobert injured a lot? Was that when? I can't remember now. Okay.
So the year, the Donovan's rookie year, Gobert's had some, yes, he's missed time almost every year with injuries. Not this year, knock on wood. But yes, so they played well together. The pick and roll, Gobert sets amazing screens, and he also rolls really well. And so, yeah, they played great together. Gobert was injured Rodney's last year with us and missed significant time. at 2 different times during the season. One time he missed 16 games, and then the Jazz went on that historic run of going 29-6 to finish the season once he was healthy. But they played really well, so he does play well with big guys.
And what were some of the things that you saw him get better at a lot? Well, when he first came to when he departed.
Rodney Hood when he was with us before he departed.
Just like what was some of the growth that you saw in Rodney Hood while he was with you?
So I feel like Rodney's a great system player, and he grew to be consistent. Like it seemed like his first couple years with us, it was either all or nothing. Like he one night could hit 5 threes out of 6 and, score 20 points like that. And then the next night he would just disappear. It would just be 1 of 8. And he didn't have that consistency. But in his later years with us, he was a little more consistent. As long as it was a system, he couldn't really be the guy. A lot of our SLC dunk writers like to compare him to Jamal Crawford, but without the foul drawing. But he plays a lot like him. And he's a pretty good defender, again, like within the system, but not always so great one-on-one. But when he's hot, there's nothing better. Like it's so fun when he's hitting from 3. He gets excited, the team gets excited. It's awesome when he is on.
Well, and from what we've seen of him so far, one of the things I really like, he's a really confident shooter.
Oh, yeah.
He does not hesitate. And that's one of my pet peeves is guys who are out there and who hesitate. And he just no hesitation. He'll turn around and do a spin or a twist, but if he gets the ball and he's got enough space, he is shooting that thing.
Yes, absolutely. And that was nice because you do see that with players and it breaks down the offense. But Rodney doesn't. If he's open and he'll shoot it, and he has great confidence. And like I mentioned, like that game winner with the little shimmy. And a nice side story about Rodney Hood is his favorite player when he was young was Joe Johnson. And there's this picture of Rodney when he was a kid with Joe Johnson. And so when we had both on the team, it was just really nice that he got to play with his favorite player. And Joe Johnson hit a game winner for the first game that we played against the Clippers in the playoff. It was a huge shot. And the first person that gave him a hug was Rodney Hood. And it was just the cutest thing. He went running across the court, jumped into his arms, and they just hugged. And it was so beautiful because Rodney just loved Joe Johnson as a kid. So for them to be able to share that moment on the court together, it's probably my favorite Rodney Hood memory of when he was with the Jazz. But he was good with fans. Everything that I heard, he was really good with fans. He wasn't one of those grouchy players that turned them away. He was always really kind, especially to kids.
Yeah, and we hear that he has a young family.
Yeah.
We had Ed Davis on the Blazers, and he had just had twins, and so when he left, we were sad because we joked that the junior Blazer team had lost 2 important role players or 2 important players, and now we have 2 more. So there's a lot of babies on the team right now.
Oh, that's awesome! I know. I love when we have little babies. I love when the players have kids.
I know that really doesn't contribute much to their game. Maybe it does. I don't know.
Sometimes it does. We used to joke with Memo Okor. I don't know if you remember him, but when he was on the Jazz, when his wife was pregnant, he was horrible. But when, as soon as she had that baby, he would go on this hot streak. And so it was this huge joke among Jazz fans, no, don't get your wife pregnant, Memo.
Not till the season's over.
Exactly.
That's fine. Well, do you have any other memories or anything else you want to tell us about Rodney Hood to help us figure out, how to make him feel welcome, help make him fit in, and what to watch for?
We just really enjoyed him, and I think the Blazers is a perfect spot for him because he obviously doesn't have to be the guy, and he doesn't even have to be the third guy. He just can come in off the bench and I think that's a perfect role for him. He tends to have nerves. Like there was a lot of games where he would leave because of stomach issues.
Oh, really?
Because of nerves. Like he would have to go to the
Excuse
bathroom.
himself.
Yeah, excuse himself. Actually, the first game of after Gordon left and he was ready to start, and then all of a sudden he was just gone. And so Donovan actually started his the first game of that season because of Rodney's issues. And then he came back, midway through the first. And so he's a little emotional and gets nervous, but I love that. It just shows that he cares. And he's a great guy on and off the court. And I'm just so happy that he's out of Cleveland and can be on a playoff team and a good team. Like, I like the Blazers. It's nice that they're another small market team like the Jazz that's consistently do well. They do well. So it's good to have kind of that partner team.
Yeah, he seems like he's going to be a real good fit. He's played at least 20 minutes every night, all 3 nights. He's come in and shot extremely well. I can't remember exactly what the stats are, but they were quite high percentage-wise. And just like I said, with confidence. And he also plays in a slightly different area of the floor than our other shooters, which is nice. So, we have Evan Turner who can really handle the ball and he distributes a lot, but he doesn't shoot well from 3. He shoots well from the block. So on the one hand, both he and Rodney can back people down on the block, but then Rodney can also pop out farther and also all the way out to the 3-point line and shoot it in. And then like Layman is really good from the corners or the very top, and Hood kind of likes those little angled areas. So it's kind of cool how they complement each other, and I hope he'll be happy here. I hope it works out.
I think he can win you some games. Like he can get hot and win you some games, and so I hope he's able to do that for you guys.
Well, tonight was not the night.
Not against that.
Oh no.
Yeah, sorry about your loss tonight. We've had those stinkers, and against Oklahoma City. I hate that arena just because of that.
Oh my gosh. You know what? I tweeted out that it was like being in the Thunderdome, and I didn't even think about the fact that it was the Thunder.
Oh.
But,
that tweet's awesome.
But it was just like, it was so, listening to the broadcast, it was so loud and so intense. And I could just like picture, from that movie, all the people like hanging from the stands and throwing things. And it was just a really hostile environment.
Oh,
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for your time, Diana. Now, can you tell folks how they can find your work?
Yeah, so I'm on Twitter at Diana Allen, DianaAllen. And I write for SLC Dunk, which is a part of SB Nation. So I'd love for you guys to come read my stuff.
We also had the chance to talk to China, who writes for the Knicks blog Posting and Toasting, and we got to talk to Rebecca, the editor-in-chief for Mavs Moneyball, to talk about the big trade that went down between the Knicks and the Mavericks, watching the Unicorn leave New York City and head to Dallas, and watching Wesley Matthews make his way to the Knicks to then leave again. So we got a chance to talk to them, and let's listen in on that interview.
China, welcome back to Women's Hoops and Talks.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Glad to have you. When I found out that the Knicks had traded Kristaps Porzingis, one of my first thoughts turned to you to find out. I am really curious what the reaction in New York was. Was it a shock, or did people see this coming?
It's really interesting because it was a total shock, and it happened so quickly. I mean, we were all sitting around in the afternoon, and then it was a week before the trade deadline, and we weren't even expecting things like this, right? Mm-hmm. Everybody was still talking about Anthony Davis, even back then, still forever.
Yeah,
but
as they will be for the next.
It's our lives now.
6 months.
But yeah, and then these little rumors started sprinkling across like the transom about they had this meeting and they thought like, oh, this is happening, and then a couple of tweets later it was Knicks brass had the opinion that KP wanted to be traded. And then like 4 minutes later, it was like they're exploring trades. And then 5 minutes after that, it was like they might trade with the Mavs. And then maybe 30 minutes after that, it's like he's gone.
Yeah.
And we were all like,
fast.
And the editor of our blog, Posting and Toasting, Joe, was at the dentist, I think, when this was all happening. So we were all on our on Slack being like, Joe, we need you. And we were all like, So I think a lot of the reaction was just shock. If you go back and look at things in like the sober light of day, you can see that there were signs. I mean, it's kind of like when you break up with somebody and you're like, what happened? And then you go back and you're like, oh, right, when I ran over their dog, maybe that was an issue. But so in retrospect, they were totally signs. He infamously skipped his end of season meeting debriefing with Phil Jackson.
That was like 2 years ago, right?
Around for 2 years. But like,
he's been simmering for a while then.
And so and there were just like little tiny rumors every once in a while from like the beats writers about like this, he's unhappy about this or something. And there was some contract situation last season where they didn't sign an extension for something or other because it would save them money for something else. But everybody's like, oh, but it's okay. It's not a big deal. Everything's going to be fine. And so nobody really thought about it because it was just an unthinkable thing, right? I mean, why would you trade him? It's crazy. But then I think other than the shock, it was like, so the surprise and like just the weirdness of it would just like took everybody over. But then as the details of the trade came out, we were all like, and it was always a joke because our guard, Frank Ntilikina, we took over Dennis Smith Jr. And so there's been a healthy debate in the Knicks fandom about who's the better person or better player. I don't know about person. That was weird. But, and so it's funny that we have both of them now. So as details of the trade came out, people were becoming a little bit more positive. And then when we found out that there were 2 first-round picks, and when we found out that one of them was unprotected, it was like, oh, actually, this actually isn't a bad trade at all.
Cool. So let's talk about the details of the trade. Let's see. Kristaps Porzingis, Tim Hardaway Jr., Courtney Lee, and Trey Burke all went to Dallas. And in return...
2 Michigan guys right there.
Courtney Lee and Trey Burke? Or Hardaway? Hardaway. Okay. And then Wesley Matthews, DeAndre Jordan, Dennis Smith Jr., and those 2 first-round picks came to the Knicks. Wesley was waived.
And he's been picked up by the Pacers. We wish him luck.
And yeah, so do we in Portland. We still miss him.
No. He had a glorious 2-game career with the Knicks where he shot like 2 for 30 or something like that. But he wore the ninja headband, so he'll live forever.
Yeah, and he shot with all his heart. That's the other thing about him. So DeAndre Jordan, it looks like he's there at least he's there to the end of the year, right? Because he has an expiring contract. And then Dennis Smith Jr., he is still on his rookie contract, so I imagine he'll be there. So yeah, what's the story? What's the dialogue? What are people thinking is the plan?
I think that the original plan was to maybe keep Dennis Smith Jr., see how he works out. And then, I mean, because he is kind of a upgrade to the point guard position for us at this point. And then, we were assuming we were just going to dump DeAndre at the end of the year. And of course, part of the whole great part about this is all the glorious cap space that we have now, like $75 million or something. But it does look so far like DeAndre Jordan has been kind of awesome, not in terms of playing, but just in terms of like camaraderie and team spirit and the all locker room presence thing. And that's something that they're really needing right now because they've lost 17 games in a row. So a guy who keeps them up is important. But also he's looking like a really good mentor for Mitch Robinson, who's our young center, who is like wildly talented but completely raw. So to have somebody who centers him and teaches him sort of like how to be a great defensive presence and stuff like that. So they are saying that they may keep him around next year. I think they can get some kind of exception, like a $5 million exception for him or something. And then the 2 picks, I believe, are supposed to come in 2021 and 23. I'm not entirely sure. The first one is complete. They're not this year's pick, no. But I believe that the first one is completely unprotected, and then the next one is not. So we don't really know. I mean, and it's an open bet what's going to happen with the Mavs, of course, at that point. Will Kristaps sign with them again? Will he? Who knows? So we don't know what kind of pick it's going to be. It'll be fun.
Was he missed a lot this year?
Or well, I mean, here's the tough thing. Yeah, you know, it does again feel a little bit like that whole like ex-boyfriend situation, and you want to be careful because you don't want to act like some crazy ex-friend and be like, I never liked him to begin with, because it just makes you sound worse, right? But I think that for the most part, people have come around to being pretty okay with him being gone. I mean, it seems crazy. It's only been a week and a half or so, but almost everybody who I talk to, they say, you know, when we lost Jeremy Lin, that was like way more heartbreaking. And just in general, Kristaps was not as gracious on his way out as you could necessarily always hope for. You know, he sort of posted some questionable Instagram, kind of like him and Luka being all cute and buddy before he ever said anything like, hey, thanks to the Knicks fans kind of stuff. And people took that kind of hard. And there's just some weird stuff with his brother. So it's all a little bit strange. And we don't know exactly what happened, but it sounds for the most part like he did indicate that he didn't really want to stick around. And he didn't like the direction the organization was going, and that's a little bit weird because the organization was going in the direction it was going because you were out all year. So that wasn't the plan, but you were out for a year. So what did you want them to do? Win without you? You want to be the franchise player, but you also want them to win without you? It doesn't really make sense to me. And we have a really, really sweet young core of rookies and young guys, and we're hoping that we get to keep some of them. I mean, look, if we can trade for like Anthony Davis, we can trade for Anthony Davis, right? But I kind of hope these guys stick around. It's fun to watch them even as they lose game after game.
That's all you can ask for, right? If they're and I mean they're in a good position for getting one of those top 3 picks anyway.
Look, the Knicks have finally learned how to tank in the year that, you know, tanking hard doesn't make as much of a difference.
Doesn't work anymore.
It's Nick's gonna Nick. But yeah, I honestly think that to sum up the whole Porzingis thing, though, is that surprisingly, like against all odds and against what I would have thought in like the first 6 hours, people are totally okay with it. Like they understand what the organization is doing. They are appreciative of the cap space. They are kind of soured on Porzingis since, you know, the kind of, we're a little bit machismo here, so it's like you couldn't handle it in New York. All right, we don't want you anyway. But you know, but there is a certain amount of that. Like if he couldn't quite take the pressure, if this wasn't like the right environment for him, well, then maybe we don't want him. So I think it's an interesting thing, and a lot of what you saw initially was like, oh, Knicks fans are all killing themselves over this. But I think it really has evolved into a place of being like, yeah, all right, this is going to be fine. It depends what happens. It depends whether we get some of these big name free agents.
Yeah, that's what I was going to ask. I was going to say, what's it if Kevin Durant does not come to the Knicks, how will people look at this? Do you think they might sour on the Knicks having let him get away or traded him away?
You know, I think we'd have to go through all of free agency and all of the draft and stuff like that before we can really make that determination. And I also think that there's at least enough people who have been burned by the Knicks just going for like spending whatever money they can to get whatever splash they can, that if they can't make a big splash this summer, are willing to let them just like hold on to the money they have and wait till the next time they can and be patient. Like, we don't have to go crazy. So I think there is a certain amount of understanding of that kind of concept. Nonetheless, people want, fun stuff here, and people want shiny things, and they want to like rally around something. So I don't know what will happen if they strike out in free agency. I want Kevin Durant. He's one of the one or two best players in the game. You'd be crazy not to want him. I'm not convinced he'd be a great personality fit in New York. I think a lot of the top guys who we're looking for, I don't think Kyrie would necessarily be a great personality fit in New York. And so that is a real concern. It's a really hard thing to play here. It's tough.
Yeah, the personalities who are on who were free agents this year, I hadn't really thought about it, but they're not a bunch of real gregarious type personalities.
No, Kawhi, like Kyrie. No, it's a terrible
Kevin
group for New York.
Durant.
Yeah.
There's not a lot of guys who would want to take the town by, or who had that personality that you think of as like really taking the town by storm.
You can't have a thin skin. But on the other hand, all these guys that we've have this history of bringing back these guys who are like, yeah, New York, like Meta and like Joakim Noah, and it just turned out to be a nightmare. So you never really know. Maybe like KD would come here and he would like discover his inner assassin and be like, whoa, yeah. I don't know. Or maybe he would come here and within like 3 months be in like an internal feud with the media and like be driven out in a year.
Well, we shall see. Either of those seem equally. Actually, I think one of them seems a little bit more likely than the other. But I don't know him personally, so I
well, he may be opening up a fake Twitter account to answer you right now.
I'll look for the one that has all the numbers behind it. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for taking time to tell me how things are going around there.
We're feeling good. We're all right here over in Knicks land.
Yeah, it sounds like you've got, even though they're not winning, they at least
that's kind of a bummer.
Yeah, but you have some guys at least you can, get behind, right?
Yeah, we're still watching games. We're still enjoying it. We love our young guys.
Well, before you go, you want to tell people where they can read your work?
Oh, yeah, I'm Chaniqua. You can find me at Twitter on @Chaniqua, CHINIQUA. And I write on Posting and Toasting every once in a while, which is the Knicks blog. So there we are. Come check us out.
Welcome to the podcast, Rebecca. How are you doing?
I'm great, Cassidy. Thanks for having me.
How did the trade unfold for you all and as Dallas fans? Because I think the rest of the league was kind of focused on Anthony Davis going somewhere, and then all of a sudden we all get an alert saying Porzingis going to Dallas.
Yeah, so it's the Mavs have a knack of doing that. They are they're very good. They're a very tight-lipped front office, and so you generally don't know things are going on until they actually happen, which is kind of fun from a covering the team perspective because there's just no build-up. It's just you find out about something and you go. But it was actually really crazy. I was working from home that day, and suddenly one of my other editors sends me a message, sends me a tweet like Porzingis in discussions to go to Dallas. And I was like, wait, what? Wasn't he just like in a trade demand earlier today? Like I didn't even pay attention to it because I didn't even think that Dallas would be a team that had a shot at something like that. But I should have known because Dallas historically, they're not a free agent destination. They don't draft well other than, Luka. But they have traditionally been very, very good at executing these kinds of trades. And Donnie Nelson is an amazing general manager who just comes up with these things somehow. And it's just crazy. So I was working from home. My editor sent me the message. And of course, I jumped up and my initial reaction was just shock. I was like, wait, what? Where did this even come from? The trade demand was just made this morning. How was Dallas even on any kind of list of people that would be considered? So we just jumped into it, but it was a shock, but it was obviously a very welcome shock because, the contracts that went back to the Knicks in the trade were, deals like Wes Matthews, who was expiring, players who, and DeAndre Jordan, who was also expiring on a big contract. So players that weren't going to be on the Mavericks next year anyway, and to get back a superstar in Porzingis, a top 15 player in the league when he's healthy. I mean, that's just, and then to pair with Luka, I think we were all in shock for a few days and maybe still are because of course he hasn't played yet. So,
and do Have they released a timetable about when he was going to play? Is that next season?
I think the plan is for him to play next season. Yes, they're not going to rush his rehab. Dallas has an amazing medical staff, an amazing training staff. It's probably top 2 in the league, up there with Phoenix. And so they will look to slow his rehab. I think there's a chance that he might play a game at the end of the season here just to kind of get the season ticket holders excited. But I also wouldn't be shocked if they just don't rush the rehab and allow him to take his time, get used to the team, and have a full training camp with the team before he starts.
And you all got a few other pretty good players in that deal. Are they all sticking around?
Well, the contracts that we got back are very interesting. So it will be very interesting to see what happens with those players as this season really, and next season progresses. So Tim Hardaway Jr. is a big contract for us to take back. But of course, we would have had, we were going to have Harrison Barnes on the book before that, went to the Kings. Mm-hmm. So that's a big contract to take back. So he has a chance to definitely earn some minutes. He's a player who gives us some depth in a few areas that we really needed it. So I think he will have a chance to earn a spot in the rotation. And certainly, for the rest of the season, these are the players that we've got. So we really have to roll with them. Mm-hmm. And Courtney Lee is another interesting guy who, again, just some depth at some positions that, he'll have the chance to earn some minutes as well. Rick Carlisle is a big guy on earning minutes. He's not afraid to pull players who are making mistakes. He's not afraid to restrict minutes to players that they're not in his favor in any given game. Mm-hmm. So I will be very interested to see how some of these new guys fit into the rotation and how they, whether they end up sticking around or whether they end up being a trade chip later on.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. How has the fan base reacted to the trade? Has everybody been kind of as surprised as everybody kind of excited and surprised about it?
Everyone's in shock, I think, still. It's really hard. Well, and part of it is because he hasn't played yet. So in theory, it's this big thing that's in theory, Dirk retires this offseason. Mm-hmm. We have Luka, we have Porzingis. The Mavericks are instant playoff contenders for however long that playoff window lasts while the two of them are still young and, playing perfect pick and roll basketball for hopefully years to come. But it's all in theory. We haven't actually seen it happen yet. Of course, there's always the Porzingis injury risk with a guy his build and his injury history. So it's a big gamble that he's going to stay healthy. But if he stays healthy, in theory, he is the perfect complement to Luka's game. Whereas some of the players who were there before, in Harrison Barnes and Wes Matthews and DeAndre Jordan, who just didn't even try this season, my Lord, they were unengaged. They were older. They were just not fitting in. And, to bring things back to kind of what we were talking about with the Anthony Davis trade rumors flying around that morning of that trade, the Mavericks essentially are doing for Luka what the Pelicans never did for Anthony Davis. They see the potential in their young superstar, and they're not wasting time in finding talent to fit around him. And so that's one thing that I think makes us very relieved that, there is the potential for him to not only stay here, but stay here long term the way Dirk did.
And so do you think this is the last year for Dirk?
I do. I really do. I've said that a number of years in a row. And Dirk has always been very coy about, well, maybe I'll come back and if I'm feeling good and, all that stuff. This year, he says some of the same things, but he's also, I don't know if you've caught any Mavs games this year, but he's very much doing the farewell tour type thing. He's coming in for 2 minutes at the end of every game. They're giving him some ceremonial shots. Everyone in the crowd is giving him these great standing ovations. He's, doing things like saying goodbye to training staffs in different arenas and workers in different arenas. Like I think he said something to the Knicks guys at Madison Square Garden. Like, if this is the last time I see you, it's been great. So I just don't see any way he comes back next year. This is his subtle farewell tour. And I don't think it's even that subtle at this point.
Yeah. Do you think, because it feels like he has such a special relationship with that organization, do you think there's a chance he comes back as a coach and works with the new young talent?
Yeah. So actually, it's interesting. He's going to be part of the All-Star Weekend festivities here soon. He's going to be coaching the Rising Stars game, that Luka will be playing in. So that's going to be a very fun dynamic for us especially for us to cover, but just for the players in general. He is good friends with, and, is kind of Kristaps Porzingis' idol. And I really see him continuing to be involved in the organization for a number of years to come. He's said that once he does retire, he wants to take some time off and travel. He's from Germany. His wife is from Sweden. They have 3 young kids. And so I know he wants to take some time off and be a dad and travel a little bit. But I think he will continue to be involved in the organization in some capacity or another, kind of doing the Tim Duncan thing where he just kind of shows up when he feels like it for a while and takes an unofficial role in the organization. And then later on, when he's done with his world travels and vacations, and maybe when his kids get older, settling into some kind of official role with the team.
Yeah, I think it would be really fun to see what kind of perspective he could bring, especially with the Porzingis-Doncic relationship, because it feels similar to things that he's been a part of in his career.
Yeah. Well, and he's also, he's got the perspective of being, probably the greatest European player who's ever played the game. And so that's a very interesting perspective. He's also just got the perspective of having been with the Mavericks for that long of a time. So he'll really be our greatest cheerleader in trying to keep these guys here long term, if that ends up being what we want, assuming everything works out, mechanics wise and injury wise and all those kinds of things. And he's just such a wonderful ambassador for the city of Dallas. So I'm really excited to have his perspective. I'm excited to have him continue to be involved with the organization, and, very excited for the future with him, whether he's involved or not. I mean, I think it's amazing what they've managed to do to move forward from Dirk while we're still being able to honor him and everything he's brought to the organization in this last season.
Yeah, I feel like it's a luxury for a team to go through that grace period without there being kind of a lull. And it feels like you may be in luck for that not to happen. And so that's kind of exciting, I feel like, just for the NBA, because it's going to be fun basketball to watch if everything works out.
It definitely will be. And, we've had a lull for the last couple of years. I mean, Dirk's been playing, but they've not been easy. It's not been an easy several years since the championship. And, I know it's nice for us to be able to say we had a championship, but that was almost 7 years ago. And that's not something Mark Cuban doesn't settle for mediocre. So, the organization does tend to swing for the fences in these trades, the Rondo trade and the, God, who am I forgetting? Nerlens Noel, because he's unfortunately very forgettable. But yeah, they swing for the fences in these big trades, and sometimes they work out and sometimes they don't. But it's fun to be a fan of a team that takes these kinds of risks, whether they work out or not. And it's fun to blog about a team that takes these kind of risks, because Cuban never leaves us without material for too long.
Yeah, I think there are a lot of Blazer fans that are jealous of some of those risks.
There's pros and cons. It's probably nice to be a fan of a team that, is just pretty stable from year to year. I feel like we have a complete roster overhaul minus Dirk almost every year for the last several years. Gets hard to keep track of.
Yeah, definitely has its perks.
Yeah.
Well, I'm wondering, how can people find you to follow all your basketball takes?
Sure. Well, so the website is mavsmoneyball.com, and we have a wonderful staff of writers who covers everything, every day from, the new guys to the old guys. We have some wonderful features coming out, an amazing feature coming out on Harrison Barnes in a few days and all of his work in the community. So I hope everyone will come visit and check that out. And if you want to find me, I'm on Twitter at BeccaAfter6. And that's how you can find us.
So it was great talking with China and Rebecca about things going around the league right now. And I'm really excited to watch what happens from this point on with those teams. I think after the trade deadline, we're also focused on our own teams, or maybe the big trade we expect. And it's fun to take a look back and kind of see what actually happened and what kind of changes are going to be made. So we'll have to watch out for everything that they were talking about.
I know. I really enjoy talking to people from other fan bases, because we get so down deep into ours and what happened or what didn't happen that we kind of lose sight of where we are in the big picture. So I always enjoy a chance to hear how somebody else is feeling about something, whether or not it's good or whether or not they're like, oh God, just to give us a little context for, what's going on in our own backyard. Well, anyway, yeah, that was really awesome to talk to everyone. And of course, it was great to hear such good things from Diana about Rodney. I'm looking forward to the rest of the year that he has here. I wonder if he, like all the other Trailblazers, is going to start drinking a lot of coffee.
I sure hope so.
What do you have for us this week for coffee talk?
Well, I don't have one yet perfect for Rodney Hood, but this week I made my way over to Dapper and Wise, and I tried some of their different espressos that they had going, and I found one that was perfect for a specific blazer. I'd say that the flavors were kind of an orange creamsicle caramel candy taste, but the prominent flavor in it was hops.
Who's got hops on the Blazers?
Mad hops go to Jake Layman. So this was definitely one of the more interesting coffees I have ever had. It was almost like a beer and a coffee had a baby, and it was amazing. And I would say that this mad hoppy coffee, the Ethiopian Bombe from Dapper and Wise, is perfect for Jake Layman.
I love it. I want to go try it. I actually am not a big beer fan, so
I am not either.
I'm not sure how the hops are going to go over, but just because you picked it out just for Jake Layman, who is my all-star. Well, I mean, obviously Damian is, but I think Jake Layman is just playing amazing and out of his mind, and I'm so happy. So I will go seek that out and drink that in honor of Jake Layman.
Yes. They also have a specialty drink there called the Honey Bear, and it kind of reminded me of the time that you and Dan talked, and he referred to Nurkic's drunk grizzly bear. So I tried that one too, just to cover all my bases for Blazer coffee related items.
Things that you do for this podcast, Cassidy. It warms my heart.
I drink a whole lot of coffee.
Well, before we sign off, I want to remind everyone that there are still tickets available to purchase for Blazers Edge Night. Every year, Blazers Edge donates thousands of tickets to local students and their chaperones to come and watch a game together. This year, that game is against the Brooklyn Nets in March, and so the kids will get treated to being able to see 3 former Blazers that night. It's real easy to purchase tickets to Blazers Edge. Pretty much all of the articles on Blazers Edge right now, at the bottom of them, have links and instructions. You'll purchase the tickets using a special code, and those tickets will be sent directly to Will Call, and Blazers will there's a ticket agent who handles the disbursement of them for us. So all you have to do is go on there, buy a couple tickets, and everything else will be taken care of, and some kids will get to go see the game. All right. Well, thanks everyone for listening. If you like what you heard, once again, you can find all our episodes on the Blazers Edge podcast feed. So go ahead and search for Blazers Edge. That's 2 words on your favorite podcast app, and go ahead and subscribe.
You can follow the podcast at Hoops and Talks on Twitter, and you can find me at Cassidy Gemmett on Twitter, and Tara is at TC Biggs.
And my Twitter handle is weird. It's TCBBIGGS. I should have made it something easier, but it's got 2 B's and 2 G's. Or you can also just like type in Team Mom, and that will probably pick it up as well. Anyway, listeners, we would love to hear from you. Let us know what you think about the show. Let us know if there's any women that you know of who we should talk to, or anybody that any questions that you'd like us to investigate. We are having a great time talking to women all over the league, so we'd love your ideas and suggestions. You can tweet at us, or you can email us at hoopsandtalks@gmail.com. Go ahead and find us, and we will catch you next time.